So I went to work for Walmart in Albuquerque, was down there for about 2.5 years. We had our first child, and I wanted to come home. And so we came back to Cedar. I worked as management in Walmart for about 1.5 years here, and I really enjoyed it. I loved finding something, getting a whole bunch and blowing it out and watching it go out the door. But you were scheduled 48 hours, and if you went less than that, it was kind of frowned on. And my theory at the time was, and the manager that I was working with, his career and mine were about identical. And he said, do this till you're 50 and then you can retire. I said, that's great. Till I went home one day and looked at my one-year-old and said, okay, when I'm 50, you're 29 and you don't need me. And so it made me kind of change my perspective on what was important. The bank came along about that same time, gave me an offer. And back then, the good old days, and that's almost 30 years ago now, they said, okay, at 3 o'clock, that's when you do all your paperwork because computers couldn't do everything for you. You know, if your kid's got a ball game, go have fun. And I was like, okay, when do I make up the time? You'll work it out. And I just went, okay, I'll come to work for you. And it's been a great run. The bank has done fabulous. At that time, we had 6 offices and we were 100 million. Now we grow more than that in a year. We have 17 locations and we're 2.6 billion and growing. And our challenge is to keep that hometown down-to-earth feeling. And I hope that's what you'll feel from this. We want to reach out to the community, make it a better place, which benefits the bank. It's a selfish but a good thing. We all kind of help each other. You've got the next classes down. If there's a topic that you would really like covered, tell us. We'll build a class around it. That's what I've been doing this last week. I kind of explained to a few of you, you're my guinea pigs. I put this slide together. Tony spell checked me, so if anything's wrong, it's his fault. But we'll just go through this. The first thing we're going to start out with, this is a video. It's a 2-minute video. It's not too long, but you've got about 6 people, and it's titled Letters to My Younger Self. So it's basically the things they've learned over their life, what they wish they knew when they were younger, and what they would do different if they could. So hopefully we can all learn from their experience.
Your younger self, huh? That's how you want me to start?
Which part? The beginning?
No, read this first and then skip to that.
Dear younger self,
Dear younger self,
Dear younger self,
make sure you are paid what you're worth.
Save for retirement as much as possible.
Don't cash out all your 401k at once.
I only have about 3 months worth of bill payments in my savings account.
We make very little on Social Security.
I still have to work to pay my bills.
I'm worried that my investments won't last me.
I don't have any retirement funds put away at all.
okay.
Are you ready now?
Dear younger self,
Open up a Roth IRA and learn how to invest.
Don't pile up debt.
I would tell myself to hold on to my investment portfolio.
Save more and give less.
Your home is one of your biggest assets. Protect it.
After I retired, I cashed out my entire 401k, deposited $110,000 for a down payment on the house. I also paid a 45% income tax bill by taking all the money at once.
I opened a Roth IRA when I was 54 finally, and I put $6,000 in it and let it sit there because I didn't know that you were supposed to invest it.
I think if I were to just leave my money alone, not move it around, then it would be worth a lot more today.
Financial advisor explained to me that I had to invest it, and I did, and now it's over $41,000.
I'm a
definitely advise younger people to put maximum amount in their 401k or IRA match, because that money grows over time.
Just imagine if I had knew how to do that when I was 25 instead of 55, it would be quite a bit more.
It's way better if you plan something way ahead of time than wait till the end like we have.
Oh, there you go, there he goes, this is where he likes to sit. We didn't realize that Social Security would be so little.
Most of my debt has accumulated with things beyond my control. It's not like we go to Vegas and have a great time and run our credit card up, but we've always needed them as well when we fell on hard times.
I missed one payment on the credit card, and it just ballooned. Within 6 months, it completely doubled.
So one of the secrets in life is you learn to spend less than what you make. If you spend more than you make, there's a problem. And most people realize that. But if you spend less than what you make, you'll have something to save. And if you put that in a tax-deferred account over time, it'll turn into something great. And we'll run some numbers just to show you. This next one's a little more brutal. Any fool can spend money, but to earn it and to save it and defer gratification, then you learn to value it differently. What do you think the answer to this question is? That's the second answer. The first one is, once you're married, you can get divorced, but the number one cause of divorce is financial issues. And when you think about it, well, I don't know if you ever listened to Dave Ramsey. I really like a lot of the stuff he says. I think he's really down on credit cards, but he had a bad experience when he was young and got in trouble with them. And so it kind of explains it. We'll talk about credit cards and what I think of them in the process.
One cause of divorce in North America today is money fights and money problems and money stress. And you got that.
I mean, and in reality, you have people in our community that go to Walmart, and when they go back to the parking lot, they hope their car's there because they're 6 months behind on a car payment. And if you thought about that, what stress that would put in a relationship. Okay, how many in here are married or in a relationship? Okay, I'm going to pick on these two. I don't know you guys from anybody. Who's the spender and who's the saver in your relationship? And that's
He spends it on dumb stuff.
did you say on dumb stuff? No, that's interesting because what I think is important may be different than what you think is important. And that kind of comes up to this next one. You got diverging paths here. One says let's save and one says let's spend. And you might have heard the nice little word over there. He buys dumb stuff. I grew up with 4 brothers. So when my wife and I got married and she started buying makeup and stuff, I was like, what's that for? Why are we spending money on that? You know, and the women may look at tools and say, why are you spending money on tools? That's kind of dumb. My wife is over here. And it's because she's extremely generous. And now that we got grandkids, I think she's more over here. I was a natural born banker. I just kind of squeaked when I came out of the womb. And the first time in my life that my bank account decreased is when I went off to school. And it was emotionally taxing on me. I would come home during the summer and I would work at a motel overnight from 11 to 7 a.m., get off, go home, have breakfast, go down to the swimming pool, teach swim lessons from 8 to 12, go home, have lunch, sneak in a few private lessons, and then play the rest of the day and do a little sleep. It was not a bad bachelor gig, but I could make enough money that I could go to school and not have to work while I was up there. That wouldn't be a good long-term thing to do, but it worked well. So if you can see, I'm here, my wife's here, is there going to be conflict? Yeah. So I'll tell you, if you've got somebody in the all spend category or the all save category, typically they're miserable people. If I spend every penny, then I'm stressed and I don't know what I'm going to do. If I save every penny, then the person's over there saying, gee, I'd like to do this, but I can't, so I have to save. And they're just not fun people to play with. So in reality, with my wife and me, I've kind of said, dear, we have to have money for emergencies and things. And she said, you know what? When we're old and dead and in the ground, it doesn't matter what's in your bank account. And so if you will work with one another, hopefully you can become better together. It can either tear you apart or you can be better people. One of the things that I talk about, and I don't have enough time to go in all the different directions I would like to, and I probably will go farther than I should. But in a good budget, like on your two, you'd sit down and say, okay, this is our budgets, and here's your fun money. And depending on what your income is, that may be, when you're newlyweds, it might be, here's your $3, have lots of fun. And it may be $1,000 later in life. But he would get to spend that money, whatever's appropriate, on whatever brings him happiness. And she doesn't get to complain, at least not out loud. And vice versa, as long as they stay within that plan. So the more information you have, the better decisions you'll make. If I go to my 2-year-old grandson and don't say, don't touch the oven, it's hot, what's he going to do? Because he doesn't know, he doesn't understand. You get burned a couple of times, you start saying, oh. And so kind of what our goal is to talk about the basics of finance, how it works, why it works, and hopefully that changes behaviors. So, without too much ado, we'll go on to this. Okay, how much is a Big Mac meal today? Anybody know off the top of the head? I had to Google it, and it may not be exact.
$6.99.
I can remember the good old days. I can start telling my black and white stories. Mom would give me $3, and I could get a Big Mac, a meal, and a cherry pie, and have change. I still remember when a Big Mac was $1, and I went, what? So for a meal, it's currently, at least online when I looked it up, $9.29. The question is, if at 20 years old, I decide I want to have a Big Mac meal instead of invest that into my retirement, what would it cost me? You ready to be shocked? If you took that same money, put it into a retirement account, assuming a 10% return, that meal is worth $820. Now, I want to be careful as I start teaching this that I don't push you over here. It's critical that we have balance. You need to enjoy life, or you won't live on a good budget. But instead of having 3 Big Mac meals a week, can I do 2 or can I do 1? So it fits within my plan. So to scare you a little bit more, anybody have an idea what a new iPhone costs? I do. $15.99. So you buy this phone when you're 20, it will cost your retirement account $141,000. And so you might start looking at that saying, where the heck are you getting this information? And if you can see this up here at 20, you multiply every dollar by $88. And as you go down, you can see how that decreases over time with your age, because there's less time for it to multiply and to grow. This other column next to it, and we'll show you another one, tells you how much you have to invest every month to have $1 million at 65. So if you start out when you're young, it's very achievable. If you get down here to 65, if I want to have $1 million, I have to put $1 million in because there's no time for it to grow. So this is just another chart like that one, but it's going to show you the diminishing returns as you age for that retirement. But before I completely make you depressed, anybody who's over 40, good old Chinese proverb, when's the best time to plant a tree? Ideally, it was 20 years ago. But if you didn't do it then and you're not enjoying the fruit and the shade, do it today. Don't complain and say, oh, I didn't do it. Do it today. And so that's hopefully the stuff that we'll talk about. If you haven't done it, it is what it is. But what do we do going forward to make the best future for ourselves? So most places don't have a pension plan or retirement plan. You usually pay into a 401k. Does anybody in here know the difference between a Roth and a traditional?
Roth's post-tax, because you invest it after you've already been taxed.
Yeah.
You're not taxed.
So if I'm making $50,000 here and I want to make a $5,000 donation into my traditional 401k, I'm only taxed on $45,000. But whenever I take any of that money out, I'm taxed at whatever my tax rate is at that time. So on a Roth 401k, I pay the tax now, and whatever I take out down the road is free money under current tax laws. Have to put an asterisk there.
Is that done through the bank?
Yeah, how do you invest?
We have an investment guy that will walk you through all this stuff that's much more knowledgeable. In fact, he was one of the two, Breck Judd. He'll be teaching a class on Social Security and a whole bunch of other stuff. But I just want you to look at these two. We're going to touch on both of those just a little bit more. I want to drive home how that can affect you. Oh, we'll do it right now. So this is a similar chart we've kind of talked about. So this is showing you the age and assuming a 10% rate of return. The S&P 500 market, over the whole history of it, some years it goes up 30%, some years it might go down 10%, but the average over the whole life of it's 10.27%. So this is very realistic. This is the number of months from the time that you're 20 until you would be 65. This is the dollar amount you would have to put in each month to have $1 million. So if I start at 20, it's just 95.40. So by doing that, 95.40 times 540, I'm going to put in $51,516 into that fund. But that fund should grow an additional $948,000. So this is where the 401k stuff becomes very interesting to me. So if I do a traditional, I avoid the tax on $51,000 going in, but I pay it on $1 million coming out. If I do a Roth, I pay the tax, the $51,000 as it goes in, and I pay nothing on $1 million coming out. So if it's going to grow over time, to me that makes more sense. You get somebody, well, I'm going to skip that because I'm going to run out of time. We're going to talk about it in another slide. This slide is pretty similar. It's the same kind of stuff. So at age 20, if I put 10% of my income into a fund continuously, that's going to give me 92% of my income in retirement. If at age 20 I'm putting away 15% of my income, I'm going to have 138% of those wages or that income in retirement. But if I wait, the longer I wait, if you come down here, if I'm 50, I'd have to put in 39% of my I'd have to put 40% of my paycheck in, and all I'm going to get is 39% of what I'm used to living on. So you start running out of time. So kind of that green area, all of this is, you can probably live on that income. Yellow is kind of iffy. Red's going to be tough. And so I don't want you to memorize all the numbers, but I want you to get the concept of, gee, I need to do something consistently and I need to start now. So how do I do it? What do I do? So this is kind of an easy trick. If things are very tight and you get a 2.5% raise, then you go to your boss and say, I want to increase my 401k 1%, because I'm not used to that money. And then I enjoy a 1.5% raise. So I've increased my savings and I haven't even felt it. So that's one sneaky thing you can do. If you did that over 10 years, you've increased your savings 10% and you haven't felt it. If you guys have I don't want to say a good question. If you have a question and we want to throw it out, we'll ask it. I'm going to stick around as long as anybody wants to talk afterwards. And we'll have a time afterwards to kind of cover this. And I'm going to feed you through a fire hose tonight. And if you don't have time tonight and you want to come back and see me another time, I sit above the front doors of the bank. You can pop in anytime, we'll chat. So are credit cards good or bad?
You pay them off, you treat them like a debit card, I think they're good.
Right? There's all kinds of theories out there. So I'm going to try and teach you a quick story on this. My wife gets after me and says, you know what? I want a shed so you get all the junk out of the garage. Would you hurry up and build that? And I'm swamped and I just don't have time. So I put out an ad and say, hey, who can come help me build the shed? And the guy calls me back, hey, I can be there next week. I'll just need to grab my hammer, some nails and some wood. I'll knock it out. I said, cool, dear, I'm on it. I got this done. Guy shows up. Not only does he look like a contractor, he's got one of these cool tool belts. And so he's out there working away. I'm inside the house in the air conditioning. And before long, I start having a wave of guilt. And so I asked this guy, I said, hey, do you want to come in and have some lemonade? And he comes walking in, he's got that cool tool belt with his hammer hanging on there. And he comes down and he sits on the couch. And as he sits down, that hammer jabs him right in the ribs. He's like, ow! And so he pulls it out and he very gingerly sets it on the glass coffee table. And I kind of went, my wife wouldn't like that. I think it, I don't say it. Next thing you know, my grandson comes through and does what a 2-year-old does.
Yep.
So is the hammer good or bad?
Simply an instrument.
The hammer didn't jump up by itself and hit the glass table. It's only a tool, and it can be used very wisely or very foolishly. So with a credit card, if I do it right, I can make a purchase in January. The bill doesn't come till February, and I don't have to make a payment till March. So this is similar, just shows your buying time, your grace time of a month. The bill comes a month later. So if you do that, there is no cost for having a credit card. If I lose my wallet and it's full of cash, odds are I'm probably never going to see it again. If it's a credit card, I call and say, cancel that. If somebody commits fraud, I call the credit card company and say, reverse the charges. There's a lot of protection. On the flip side, there's a lot of temptation, and we'll get to it. Credit cards are a wonderful tool if you use them wisely. You get to use somebody else's money for free for 2 months while at the same time building your credit history. And the credit card companies will even provide you rewards to use their stuff. I mean, there's tons of them that'll give you cash back, airline miles, motels. They have a whole catalog of stuff that you can get. But who pays for that stuff? It's the merchant. So if you go buy something at Walmart and you use a credit card, Walmart pays a percentage of that sale, anywhere from 1% to 3%, depending on the credit card typically, to the credit card purchaser. And also the people who don't pay off their monthly balance are helping to pay for those things. So the question, are you one of those people paying for rewards, or are you one of the people receiving rewards? There's a good old saying that says, them who understands interest earns it. Them that don't understand it pays it. And there's a lot of truth to that. On here, take a look at that and tell me what your answer would be. You drive up at the Burger King drive up and he says, 2 for $10. Hey, that's great. And they say, that'll be $12. And you go, what? It says 10. Could be taxes, but this is the effect if you buy that meal for $10 on a 20% credit card. I mean, it would be very hard to convince you to pay an extra 20% for something if you saw it for 10. Would you like it for 10 or 12? Let me think. But people do it all the time. They swipe it and they never think about it. I've got some numbers over here. If you had some new person get a credit card and they swipe up $5,000 worth of stuff, only make the minimum payment, how long do you think it would take them to pay it off? At 50 years, they would still owe $1,500 of that $5,000. Part of the problem is you pay it down, the minimum payment drops. So if you get in the boat where you're in debt, you just have to buckle down and pay more. How does your credit score affect you? Do you realize that your car insurance is partly based on your credit score? Your loans at the bank are definitely scored by your credit, because all your credit score is a history of how you've paid in the past. And so somebody's looking at you and saying, are you a good risk? And for most people, they're kind of like, I don't understand that. But if I came in here and said, the reason I'm teaching this class is because I'm an incredible student. In fact, I have a 0.2 GPA. Everybody starts going, you don't have a clue, I'm leaving. Because you understand, the scale of 0 to 4.0. It's very similar. So this is the scale for a credit score. It goes from 850 as a high down to 300 as a low. If you get below 600, it's pretty hard to loan to you. And the more you go down this scale, the more your cost goes up. Because basically, if those numbers are down, that means you haven't done what you said you would do in the past. And so you're a greater risk. So how do you fix that? Pay on time. If you do what you say, and the other thing is you need to make sure you don't take on obligations that you can't afford. Sometime in your life, someone, a child, a neighbor, a cousin, is going to say, I got bad credit. Will you co-sign with me? You don't need to pay. I just need you to help me get the loan. If you do, what you're really doing is you are a co-signer, co-obligator. And the bank can go to whoever they think's easiest to collect that money. And if the person doesn't qualify on their own, there's a reason. So if you can't afford to make the payment, don't sign. And if a family member ever wants to borrow money, consider that a donation. And if it comes back, that's a bonus, because it tears families apart. Credit scores, this is what it's made up of. It's your past payment history, amounts you currently own, how long you've had credit. Going back to that GPA score, if I've got a freshman in high school and he says, I'm going to be a 4.0 all the way through high school, you go, maybe. But if you get somebody who's a senior in high school and they've got a perfect 4.0 and they say, hey, I'm going to graduate with a 4.0, you go, yeah, you probably will. So kind of the same thing on here, how have you done in the past? The next one is new credit. If you get more and more new credit, you haven't proved that you can manage that. So as you open new credit, it can actually lower your score. And then the last one is the type of credits. So if I have a house, credit card, auto loans, and I've been able to manage all of these different things, my score goes up versus a person that's only had a credit card because they haven't quite proven themselves yet. So how does a credit score affect what you pay?
The higher the credit score, the less interest.
Yep, your interest rate goes down as your credit score goes up. And if your credit score is low enough, we can't loan to you unless you have a cosigner. So the cost of a $20,000 auto loan, here's my weird bank math. If you take 20,000 times 10% would be 2,000. Half of that is 1,000. Or you can do it with the calculator. That's easier. So if I've got good credit, I'm at 5%, I'm paying $1,000 worth of interest approximately in the first year. If I've got bad credit, if I'm at 20%, I'm paying $4,000 for the same thing. So the question is, what do you get for that extra $3,000? The answer is at the bottom. So it's critical that you do the right things to help yourself out. When are bad things going to happen? Will bad things happen? Do emergencies come up? It's not if, but when. They're going to happen. So my grandson, who calls me Pop-Pop, if we have some food, which would be treats for him, something to drink during a power outage, he'd call that indoor camping. Life is good. There is no crisis. And if you get over into here, the old quote is, if you're prepared, you shall not fear. So if you're ready for things and it happens, it's not a big deal. If I've continually saved for emergencies, when they happen, it's not a, oh no, the world's coming to an end. I still don't want to spend money to fix a dryer that I already have, or the water heater, or the car, but it's not life-altering. Some of the things to think about on an emergency fund is you set money away for life's unexpected events. Why do you do it? It's so you don't avoid high-interest debt. How much should you have? Probably to 3 to 6 months of expenses. The more risky your life is, the more broken down things you have. You may have to have a little bit bigger. That would depend. Then the last one is, where do you put it? You've got to have it somewhere where it's growing, but so you can get to it when there is an emergency. Because it's not if, it's when. You know, I've got a fridge that I can hear the ice machine, it starts squeaking. You feel the pressure building up, and it's a when. It's coming. When you buy with credit, do you typically spend more than you would with cash or a debit card? Yes or no, and why?
I would say yes, because you have it sitting there, and if you had $10 cash, and it's a $15 thing, you wouldn't buy it, but because you're doing credit, you buy it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna jump back one thing. I'm gonna tell a bad story on myself. And my wife's not here, so I can get away with it. So knowing that my wife, you all know her really well now, she likes to spend, but I didn't say anything if you saw this. During Christmas, she is extremely generous. She sees stuff and sees happiness. I see stuff and say, how much does that cost? I'm doing better though. I'm in therapy. It'll work out. But I knew she'd overspend her money for Christmas. So I intentionally put extra money in her account thinking, okay, this will help her and it will relieve my stress. Month later, she comes back and she says, you know my credit card bill that's coming up? I said, yeah, and I'm thinking, I got this covered. I gave you extra money. I'm gonna need more. And before my brain could fully process this, I watched out of my mouth come, you need to park that credit card. If you could see the hurt in her eyes, if I could have reeled that back in, I would have done anything. That was the perfect time to say, okay, how did we get here? Why did we overspend? Maybe I'm not giving you enough money. Maybe we should freeze your credit card in a block of ice so it has to melt, before you can use it. But it's critical to understand when to have these discussions. And I blew it. I was at fault. Should she have spent what she spent? No. Did I handle it well? No. So hopefully that's when you can sit down and really talk. And sometimes you have to give yourself a timeout. I'm going to come back in 15 minutes. We'll talk about this. But it's a lot better to have discussions about some of these hard things than to bury your head in the sand and be annoyed. The goal is to get more here. And it should have been for me to understand what and why instead of just react. So learn from my mistakes. Credit cards versus cash. If I go into Walmart with 20 bucks, I'm going through the aisle, 16, 17, 18, I'm going to stop because I can't calculate the tax. Going through with a credit card, 18, 19, oh yeah, I need that, 20, 25, just put it on the card. Because it doesn't force you to stop. It doesn't force you to be accountable. So realize that if you go in with a credit card, statistically, you will always spend more money than if you just went in with cash. And that can be part of your plan. So this is audience participation time. And you can see my incredible artwork here. So this is our Walmart. This is the front doors. What I want you to do is tell me on a regular basis when you go to Walmart, what specific items do you need to buy?
Milk.
But what specific? So milk. Milk's going to be about back here. What else?
And eggs.
Eggs are about here.
Toilet paper.
Toilet paper, I think it's about here.
Prescriptions.
Prescriptions is over about here. Shampoo.
Yeah.
Cereal,
Fruit.
I think it's about here. Fruit's up here. If you've got young ones in the house, you got diapers here. If you're female, you got feminine hygiene.
Pets.
Pets are over here. Automotive, I'm getting something for my windshield wiper. Have you noticed a pattern here? Wouldn't it be really convenient if all the things I regularly get, I can just in, get it, get out?
Yeah, you wouldn't buy much.
Okay? They are strategically placed. And a lot of these things are what you call a low-cost leader. They may actually lose money on it, but if you go all the way through the store, you're going to buy other things that they're going to make it up on it. So when you go into a Walmart, every department manager every month has a VPI or a volume producing item. Their most important real estate are those end caps.
So don't buy those that month?
Not necessarily, but and I'll,
I was like, oh, okay.
if I don't answer it, you come back to me. But those are impulse items. And if you notice on these checkouts, what are the prices? The old rule used to always, it had to be $9.97 or less. So if I'm tooting along on my cart, $10, throw it in. And it's never $9.99 because your brain thinks that's $10. It's always, they don't end in 1s, 5s, or 9s. And that's more psychology than I can help you with. So if it's under $10, it goes on an end cap. And so in the middle of July, if you're running that store, I might have sleeping bags, fireworks, soda pop, stuff that as I drive by, I'm going to say, oh, I need to get that. So this goes back to the more information you have, the better decisions you have. So when you go past an end cap and you go, hey, I know what you're trying to do to me. But you can still stop and say, do I need this? Does it fit in my plan? If it does, it's okay to buy it on the end cap. But understand why they do that. Now, one of the strange rules with Walmart, that $10 rule does not apply when? December. And especially in December when it's guy buying stuff. Because they say, it's 3 p.m. on the 24th. I got time to do my shopping. And they go down the aisle, boom, boom, boom. Okay, I'm done. We're out of here. And they are not price sensitive. Because my mission is to get this stuff done so I'm not in trouble. That's why you don't see a $1,000 computer on an end cap. You're not going to impulsively say, hey, $1,000, yeah. It's a waste of that real estate. So this goes back to you understanding what's happening psychologically and what's happening here. And there's a reason they run you through the whole store. And that's why it's critical that you have a list of what you really need. And we'll talk about needs and wants a little bit later. But that doesn't mean if I go in and I say, oh, I forgot this. Not on the list. Never mind. You can still get it if it makes sense to your plan. And we'll talk about that. So you run through the whole store, and what do you eventually tell yourself? I'm done. I'm either out of money or I'm done shopping. So what do? No, you don't stop in the store. You got to get out. You head to the front. But are you really done? Okay. So the thing I want you to think about, and you can't really see the prices. In the old days, and this is 30 years ago, it had to be $2.97 or less at the checkouts. Why? Why does it have to be so much less? What have you already told yourself if you're there? I'm done shopping. And so, yeah, if it's only $1, and is there a reason the candy is located where it is? Is there a reason, if I happen to be about this height, I'd be an average female, what would I be looking at? I jokingly call them mommy magazines. But it's interesting tabloid magazines that somebody might get into. So, and this goes back again, the more you understand what's happening to you, the more you can stop and say, do I really want to do this? Does this make sense for me? 401k matches. Who in here has a matching 401k? Okay. It's critical that you take advantage of matching money. That's 100% guaranteed return. What does your business match you?
About 3%.
3%? Okay. We're going to talk about in this slide just the difference. And it talks about you can't afford not to take advantage of free money. You got two different employees, and on this one, does it say how much? 4%. It doesn't tell a dollar amount. But at age 25, they both want to retire early. One has matching, this one has matching, this one doesn't. This person can retire 4 years earlier because of that matching grant. So it just multiplies your money that much faster. Here's another. These are two brothers. So they're 60-year-old brothers. This brother was the playboy. He only invested for 10 years. This one did for 30 years, but they both put in $500 a month. So 500 times 10 years would be 60,000 he put in. It's going to grow 42,000, so he has 102. This person who is 3 times more, 180,000, but his grows 950,000. It's a little more than 3 times. It's more like 10, maybe 20 times. So start early as you can, whatever stage you are in life, and consistently do it. When you hear the word budget, what do you feel or what do you think? Honestly.
A plan.
Yeah. Most people, there's a negative connotation. I hear budget, that means I can't spend. So what I want you to do is try to have a mind shift, and all a budget really is, it's a roadmap to your financial happiness. How do I get the greatest amount of joy out of this money? It's your plan. It shouldn't be a burden. It should actually free you up because you know what you can and you can't do. I had a couple come in, and this has been close to 30 years ago. I think they both worked at SUU, if I'm remembering correctly. I was a young, late 20s, and came in, and the husband was making $6,000 a month. She was making $4,000 a month, and they said, "We can't make it. We can't pay our bills." And I said, "$10,000 a month? I'd like to try that," because that was 3 times what I was making or more. And the interesting thing, and there's a common thread almost any time when I run into this, I'll say, "Okay, how much are you making?" And they know. "Well, where's it going?" And they'll tell me 3 or 4 things, and they say, "And I don't know where the rest goes." And because they don't know, they can't evaluate, is this a good choice for me? I don't know how many people will know this lady. She worked with me for 15 or 20 years. Sweet little old grandma. She was like another grandma to my kids. They'd come in and she'd spoil them rotten. And she was a consumer loan officer, so she did car loans forever. And they'd come in and get a car loan from her. These kids younger kids would come in and make poor choices and say, "I'll just go talk to Grandma Adele and she'll be nice to me." And they'd go in and I'd chuckle because they'd say, "We're not making it. What should we do?" But she just told it how it was. You either spend less or earn more. What do you want to do? Well, I wanted to spend more and not have to work.
Yeah.
And she'd like, "Nope, doesn't work that way." So it's critical that everybody do some kind of a budget. And there's a whole bunch of techniques, and I'll show you a bunch of different ways. This just gives you a list of, for a month, you should write down, here's all my source of income. And then say, okay, where is that money going? And then after you see where it all goes, you create your plan for happiness, also known as budget, but we won't call it that. Your plan for happiness. And you say, this is where I want my money to go. And then after a month, you review it. Now, is it set in stone and it can never change? No, it's your plan for happiness. It's not anybody else's. So if he's making dumb choices on whatever he's doing, then you sit down and you lovingly say, what can we do better to have more happiness? Because you got to remember, number one cause of divorce is finances. So if he makes a mistake, don't use the big club. Just lovingly encourage him till he gets it. But you've got to track it so you know that you are doing good or you're not doing good. And at the end of each month, basically you look and say, how did we do? If you did great, carry on. If you want to make some tweaks, make some tweaks. So here's one of the budget plans. This is called the 50-30-20 rule. So 50% of your money should go towards needs, 30% towards wants, 20% for savings. And part of that saving is setting up an emergency fund. And if you have a good little cushion, then you don't have to worry when things happen, because they will happen. And most all of this stuff, you'll see everybody else's names on this stuff. I wasn't going to recreate everything. There's tons of good stuff out there. And if you go through and look at stuff and you come and say, hey, I read this, what do you think? I'll tell you my opinion based on 30 years. Here's some other budget methods. That's the same one. Over here goes to 70% for needs, 20% for wants, and 10%. So it's a little more restrictive. This is the zero-based budget, and that's where I would recommend most people start. And basically all you're doing is saying, here's my total income, and this is where every penny goes.
Isn't that what Dave Ramsey recommends?
I think he's more that way. Dave Ramsey and I would differ on credit cards. And we'll talk a little bit more on why I think coming up, if I can remember all these slides. The last one is an envelope system. And if you get to the point where you say, a credit card is too much of a temptation for me, get rid of it and just use a debit card, because you can only spend what's in the bank. Or this is kind of one step farther, and you take your paycheck, cash it, and you divide it up in envelopes. And when that category is done, you're done. And you just have to wait. I've got a little autistic son, and his perspective on money is funny. Well, I spend all that. Well, what did you spend it on? Well, I went by and Dairy Queen was right there. Well, is that a need or a want? I guess it's a want. And you slowly try to teach. Okay. This is where Tony's supposed to cue me up. So, I want you to picture we're one big happy family. And we have this big family meeting. And I say, you know what, guys? From now on, whenever you go past and you got loose change, this is what we're doing. So, a week or two goes by. Every time I go to the store and I come back, things just getting fuller and fuller. What are you eventually going to do or ask? Okay, we're going to cash it in, but what do you want to know? Yeah, why are we putting money in a Coke jar? What are you thinking? See, if you're a real cheap banker, you'd say, if you take that and put it in the bank, you'd be earning interest. But what I do is I tell you, the reason we're putting money in there is because when it's full, we're going to Disneyland. So it's critical that you understand, why am I saving? Because if you don't know why you're saving, all it means is you're controlling me. You're stopping me. But if I can see my goal, and this is what I really want, which some people it may not be, if this is really what I want to do, then as that starts to fill up, I can see I'm making progress, and it's a little more exciting, and you do it. So the key is, whatever you guys are saving for, put it to the forefront. I understand I'm choosing not to spend on a Happy Meal today because I want this thing that's better later. And that's the whole thing. Keep your eye on the prize. What do you really want? You buy a Big Mac meal a month later, how much happiness is it bringing you? Might be a little more carryover, but I don't want to push you one way or another. It's all about balance. You want to save for the future, and my wife helps me remember the reason we're doing stuff. So this Christmas, guess what my wife said? And I didn't say anything dumb this year. She said, we should do more of an experience thing than just buy gifts. I said, okay, I'm listening. Tell me about this. So she said, we should go and take the grandkids and all the kids and go do a vacation somewhere together. And I said, hey, that sounds great. So we found a screaming deal. We're going to get out of here in the middle of winter and go enjoy some sunshine. And the only problem was she came back and said, oh, you know how we're going to do Christmas later? Well, I still had to get some stuff. But I was onto this. I was smarter this time. I just said, yes, dear. So it's critical to understand this. The more education you have, whether that's formally through school, apprenticeship, military, whatever, trade work, the more education you have, the more people are willing to pay you. The other interesting thing is the more education you have, the less chance you have of ever being unemployed. And if you look, I was joking, I think, was it Tony, were I talking to you about this? Or is it Sammy? Okay. So here at the bank, if the bank went through a terrible time and we had to let some people go, which we haven't done in 30 years, just so you know, who would you let go? You're going to let go people that doesn't take as much education to replace. If I can bring somebody else in and train them in 2 or 3 weeks and they can pretty much do your job, then you start to be a little more expendable. If you've got skills and knowledge of how the bank works, why it works, I'm going to pay you even during the hard times because I don't want to lose you. And the other thing I want you to keep in mind is no matter what your job is, you need to keep increasing your skills. Tony's making me learn things now that I never dreamed I would do 20 years ago. Jobs change. And every day when I'm interacting with people, possibly even here, I'm interviewing for my next job by what I do. So if my skills increase, I'm working on my people skills, then I'm employable somewhere. If I quit growing and quit learning, you can get outdated pretty quick. This is that same thing. It's just talking about the income you can expect to make. I go out and I teach at the prison, and I was teaching the female inmates last time, and this girl started out, she didn't even have a high school degree. And she just graduated, she got her GED while she was in jail. So by doing that, she goes from this amount, $35,000 per year without a high school, to $44,000. So she'll make $355,000 more in her lifetime just because she got her GED. If she goes on and, so that'd be about a $1.7 million. If she went on and got her bachelor's, she's going to get an increase of about $1.2 million. And so it's trying to teach them. And the thing I have to be very careful is college is not for everyone. But if that is not your course for gaining skills, what are you doing? And you got to do something. Overdraft protection. Do I need overdraft protection? It helps you if you write a check and you happen to write the numbers wrong instead of it being returned. It'll pay, but you start paying interest for it, but that's a lot better than $25 fee to the business. It helps you build your credit. A lot of people don't know that. If I have overdraft protection, I have a line of credit that says, okay, if I ever go into the negative, it kicks in. So every month it's sending a file to the credit bureau saying, I either paid on time or I didn't pay on time. And if I have no balance and don't use it, it's saying, you paid on time. You paid on time. So it's increasing my score. But the thing you have to be careful is you don't treat that as your extra money. Well, I've got $500 in my account and I've got $500 in overdraft, so I got $1,000, right? I didn't say anything about my wife, did I? I'm doing better. Set up automatic transfers. you can open up as many savings accounts as you want. It's $10 to have a savings account set up. And then you can say, gee, I want to put so much in for my home, education, travel, Disneyland, whatever you want. I'm a little crazy about stuff like this, so I have a food storage account. So when they have case lot sales, I don't have to say, gee, I wish I had the money to get this. I'm going to have to buy corns and beans and all of this stuff anyway, so I might as well buy it when it's on sale. And you have to look at whatever station you are in life. I might be able to buy a whole case, or can I buy one extra can when it's on sale? So you're just doing smart things over and over again to help you. Interesting, if you have an automatic transfer, the stats where you're 5 to 6% more likely to save. And because you can set it and you forget about it. My little autistic boy, if he had a penny in his pocket, he's got to spend it. So he gets an automatic transfer every Monday, and it's gone by about Tuesday. And I've actually contemplated, maybe I can do it every day. Haven't gone that restricted yet. I'm trying to be nicer. My wife's trying to help me. But it's critical for you to do. I mean, vacation, my kids love Vacation Dad. Does that sound strange? So I save for vacation. And most of the time they're asking, Dad, can we do this? Can we do that? If you got money, go ahead. I don't want to do it. Well, then okay. But when we go on vacation, I've saved up money for months and sometimes years to go do fun things. So when we're on vacation, Dad doesn't say no. And Grandpa doesn't ever get to say no. Because I've saved for that, that's the purpose for that money, and it's okay to enjoy it. And that's where budgeting properly frees you up to have fun. So we talked about that a little bit. You know, if you've got an automatic, if you're sending $10 over to a food storage account, they have a case lot sale, you say, whoo, I'm going to go get my stuff. And when the bill racks up and it's $300, and you go, whoo, it can either be the, or, oh yeah, I've already got $400 saved for that. That's what it's for. So it frees you up. Credit scores. It's important that you check your credit score. And if you can see this up at the top, it's annualcreditreport.com. If you go to that site, you can get a free credit report every year from TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. I should probably be pointing over there since your camera's over that way. Okay. If you go to one of these sites and it asks you to enter a credit card, you're on the wrong site. And they'll do sneaky things like there'll be annual credit reports or annual credits reports. There's people that buy those just to try and trick you. So, but you can do that by phone, by the internet, or write a letter, and they'll give you a copy of your credit report. And you want to check it and make sure it's accurate. And 90+% of the times they're right. A lot of times when you have a Bob Smith Jr., Bob Smith Sr., sometimes things get mixed up. Or somebody might transpose a Social Security number when they're entering it, and it might go to one file when it should go to another. But it's important you check that, just to make sure it's accurate, because it will cost you money. This old saying, I've seen too many sad things. If it's too good to be true, it's not. There was some article in California, so Brad Pitt was supposedly writing this lady, and she gave away X number $100,000 to him. It wasn't Brad Pitt. You know, if it's too good to be true, it's not. One thing I will throw out on a fraud line, if you ever receive a check and they're supposed to cash it and then send it back out, don't do it, it's fraud. And there's all kinds of compelling stories that they'll emotionally try to reel you in. If I hadn't spilled the beans and we had more time, I would try and perpetuate the fraud on one of you just so you can see how it happens. But the short version would be, if it were you, I'd ask you, what kind of a car do you drive?
Chrysler Pacifica.
Chrysler Pacifica. And I say, oh, that's the car my wife had when we got married. And being the cheap banker, and you know me now, you know, I said, we can't afford 2 cars. And so I made her sell her favorite Chrysler Pacifica. And so I would go back to you and say, okay, how much are you willing to sell that for? Because I needed to get that one just like it. And it's miraculous that it's the same color, the same model. So this will make my wife happy. And she finally says, yeah, I'd sell it for $5,000. And I come back and say, I'll do it for $5,500 if you'll hold on to it for 2 weeks. I've got to arrange this stuff. Mysteriously, 2 weeks later, instead of $5,500, she gets $15,500. And she kind of goes, what is this? And I call back, and this is where the con really starts happening. I say, hey, did you get the check? Did you notice the amounts were off? Since we talked last, my wife and kids got in an accident, and they've been in the hospital. My wife died. One's still in critical condition. The other one's on life support, but I was a basket case, and I just turned this over to the accountant and said, take care of this. And I've got to get this car because of the emotional connection to my wife. So you've got the check, right? This mortician is the biggest jerk in town. He's threatening to dig up my wife if I don't get that money over to him. So I'm going to send you the route and transit and the bank account number. If you'll just keep the rest of the money, I'll arrange to get the car next week. But if you'll just transfer that $10,000. And if I play the scam right, what she feels like, she's the only one that's stopping from fixing my pain. And I'd really ham it up. You know, and eventually you say, you know, when can you do that by? And nine out of 10 times in a crowd, I can get somebody to say, yeah, I can go do that by 3 o'clock today. And what will happen is they transfer that $10,000. It's off to some other criminal. She'd get a call from the bank saying, your account's $10,000 in the hole. And you're going, how did it go 10,000 in the hole? Well, that $15,500 check that you deposited was bogus. And all of a sudden you're now going, what do I do? And there's all kinds of variations to that. So lock that into your mind. If you ever get a check and somebody wants you to turn around and send the money somewhere else, it's a scam. Don't fall for it. And if it's too good to be true, I could tell you a lot of stories. Cement plants in Vegas that if you just put this money in, it's going to pay this much. And it was just way too good to be true. And that particular story, a brother of mine heard about it from a clergy member. Well, he's church. No, frauds happen all the time, and all of us are enticed a little bit by greed. If you do this quick, if you do this, if it doesn't make sense, go ask somebody else that can give you a little more advice, even if you want it to be true. So when is a sale a good deal? Okay, ladies, moment of truth. How many of you have bought an item on sale that's still in your closet that you have never worn? And how many of you are willing to admit that you probably may never wear it, but you can't get rid of it? So the one thought change I need you to think about is when something's on sale, you go, 75% off. Get rid of the 75% and say, okay, for the price that it is, am I willing to trade the money I have for that? Because once that money's gone, I can't use it anywhere else. Because in reality, I can get this, let's say this dress for $10 from China. I mark it up to $100. Nobody buys it for some strange reason. I mark it down to 25 and it blows out. I've still made $15. That's kind of what happens sometimes. That's a little exaggerated. But if you can do the mind switch that is it worth it to me for that price regardless of whatever else they've marked? Can you see any stress on her face? So when you go in to buy a car, what is your objective?
Get a car.
To get a car for what? The lowest price I can possibly get. What is his objective?
Add every add-ons he can.
He wants to sell it for as high amount as he possibly can. If you don't do your homework, and he does this 6 days a week, who's going to win? Yeah. So it's critical, and with the computers now, you can get on and book out, find out what the Pacific Chrysler's selling for, and is it a good deal or not? You need to do your homework, and if you don't, you will pay for it. And I'll tell you one other sneaky thing. Don't tell anybody I told you this. When you go to buy a car nowadays, the dealerships make more money financing the car than they do selling it. So you go in, they have you fill out an application. You can really tell people, I'm just joking. You fill out an application, and they'll send it off to 5, 10 different places. They'll get the absolute lowest price they can. So they start out at first and say, okay, for $12,000 you can have this car, and you go, no. Okay, $11,000 you have this car, no. And you finally get them down to $8,500. You start over again in the finance department. Instead of the 5% that the bank would really give you, I can get you for 7% because they're going to mark it up to make more money. So it's critical to do your homework on the car and your homework on what interest rate you qualify for. If you go into the dealer and you've gone to a trusted bank and they say, hey, you can get a 5.9% rate, and they go in and they say, we can do you for 5. Take the 5 and run. But if they come back and say 8, then you go, no thanks. And you can see how quickly they say, how about 7? How about 6? Because they want something. What happens on a 0% loan if it's 0% for 24 months after 24 months?
Get all that interest added on at the end.
If you don't pay it off in full, all of the interest is retroactive. Usually, you'd have to read the contract, but most of them are written that you end up paying all of the interest. Let's say it's $1,000 something you bought, and you paid it down to $100, and you say, oh, I'll pay that off over time. It's not just interest on the $100, it's on the full $1,000, typically. And this goes back to the more information you have, the better decisions you'll make going forward. And I think that's the end.